And then there were 10. We have finally reached the postseason for Season 5. Just 10 teams remaining. This is where the season gets the most exciting. We are finally going to talk about the playoffs, MVP race, all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wonder Room. I'm your host, King Vasser. Thank you all for watching. Coming up on today's episode, it is the postseason primer. We will cover the last of the regular season, talk about week 6, look at the final power rankings, see who is on the best roll heading into the postseason, talk about the MVP race and all the award winners. Don't go anywhere. Wonder Room starts now. All right, let's get on into it. The final week of the regular season has passed, and things shook up in a very interesting way. Ruby League standings, Akala Island did in fact hang on to win the top seed and unofficially win the Ruby League with a 20-2 record. That is, by win percentage, the fourth best record in NWBA history. Very, very impressive. Still finished only one game behind him is Spike, 19-3. Again, one of the most impressive records in NWBA history, and yet it just wasn't enough to clinch the Ruby League. But Spike absolutely has every reason to be proud of the season. Finished the hottest team technically with a 9-game win streak. Did not lose a single match after the rematch to Akala Island. So very, very impressive fight from Spike all the way to the bitter end. New Moon Island finished in third place with a very respectable 16-6. Very good. Would have won the Sapphire League if Nico was over there. So, you know, we've seen it all season how top heavy the Ruby League was, and the final records reflect that. Lava Ridge ends up making the playoffs at 11-11, finished right at 500 thanks to that 2-game win streak at the end. And Treasure Town ended up being the last team to sneak into the playoffs by virtue of win count, not even by better record. Same record as Veilstone, was 1-1 in terms of tiebreaker, but just barely edging Will out in the game count. Very interesting considering how much worse the win differential is, but Zebby was able to sneak in right under the bell. As a result, Will ends up missing the playoffs despite the identical 9-13 record. Lentamas finishes 5-17. For those of you who are paying attention over in the Discord, the agreement was in place that if Keg won 5 best of 3s, he would have access to Dom's stream key. Unfortunately, one of those wins was in fact the best of 1 metronome, so Keg falling again by the terms set in place on the agreement by Dom and Keg, just 1 game out of fulfilling that requirement. But 5-17 isn't that bad of a record for a draft newcomer. We have seen far worse seasons from first-time players, so not that bad at all from Keg. And then in last place, Alfanada 4-16-2. Chris was almost able to avoid relegation. Unfortunately, getting swept by Keg is what ended up sealing his fate. And so he will be representing the Ruby League in the relegation match. Over in Sapphire, Mali City emerges as the top seed, 15-6-1. Did just enough to end up taking the top spot after a very surprising week forfeit from Humalau. Verbank occupies the 2 seed, also identical record, 15-6-1. Much like the Treasure Town Veilstone case, Mali City ends up winning the Sapphire League due to game count, because Muffin and Kevin did in fact split the season series. So Kevin ends up getting that tiebreaker. So we saw the Sapphire race actually end up being just as hectic as it possibly could have down the stretch due to the fact that Humalau decided not to play the last week of the season. But Hobu did his math, checked the numbers, still finishes a 3 seed, so he will avoid that dreaded wild card game. Having to play in that wild card game, Lavender Town finishing 12-8-2. Not a bad record from Logan. A bounce back from his record in Season 4. And then that last spot, the number 5, Mount Hokulani at 9-12-1. Kami's worst season to date. But he did the important thing, which was make the dance. That's all you need to do. All bets are off now. Newburgh Town finishing at 6-16. Again, very respectable record for a first-time draft player, especially considering how CJ's draft went. You know, has, truth be told, one of the weaker rosters in the league, and yet he still managed to win 6 sets. Had a few upsets. Very respectable season from CJ. Himalaya City finishes at 4-16-2. So Trey, about what we expect from him season-wise. And then in last place in Sapphire League, Newbark at 3-18-1. Rhino, just the motivation wasn't there. Lost 9 straight. I believe the last 8 of those were all forfeits. So Rhino will be representing the Sapphire League in the relegation match. We said going down the stretch, it very easily could have been Rhino or Trey. It really depended on who was actually going to show up on Saturday, and it turns out Trey was the one who showed up, and that's why he's not playing in it. So you will see Alfrenada and Newbark in the relegation match. For the final Pokemon of the week, Open Ruby League. Last week we saw Reggie Drago put up the best week out of any mine in Season 5, and Zamazenta H rolled up and said, I can do you one better. 21 KOs, which ties Reggie Drago for the most KOs in a single week in Season 5, but an additional 3 points than Reggie Drago had with 39, which is now the Season 5 record. 4.3 points per game, which was 4th over the course of the week, and 2.3 KOs per game, which was 2nd over the course of the week. Zamazenta having such a strong final week of the season that it inserted itself right into MVP consideration. That is absolutely what you want to see from one of your best players heading into the playoffs for New Moon. So things are rolling over there as far as Zamazenta is concerned. We'll see how much of that momentum will carry on into the playoffs. Over in the Sapphire League, Mali City for the 3rd time this season has put up a Pokemon of the Week. It's finally Arcanine H. You think Amon, that was almost wire-to-wire MVP leader in the Sapphire League, would have won Pokemon of the Week before Week 6. Didn't happen, but it's happened now. 14 KOs, which was 2nd in the league over the course of the week, as well as those 26 points. 3.7 points per game and 2 KOs per game, which was tied for 4th over the course of the week. This, I think, is the cherry on top of the cake. I think, like I said, Arcanine H was pretty much a clubhouse leader for most, if not the entire season for MVP. And with this performance, I'd like to think that it has convinced the voters that this is the runaway winner for that award over in the Sapphire League. Also, additional note, Mali City, again, 3 Pokemon of the Week winners. I believe it has only happened 3 or 4 times in NWBA history. I'd have to go back and check the numbers, but incredible season for Mali City, which, I mean, even back when they were Lily Cove, they were always putting up great numbers, 3-4 All-Stars a season consistently. So this really isn't that much of a surprise that the numbers ended up going Mali City's way, considering how Kevin had played all season. Best season to date, and Arcanine H's numbers reflect that. For our final power rankings before the playoffs, not much movement. Of course, these teams kind of settled in. Alcala Island, Sunny Shore are still your top 2. Went undefeated in week 6, so they still hold the top 2 spots. By rate, you can tell by record, these are the 2 best teams in the league. So chances, odds are one of these 2 teams will be representing the Ruby League in the NWBA finals, but this is playoffs. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a lot to go. But again, odds-wise, these are the best 2 teams in the league. And their ranking in the power rankings reflect that. Burbank jumps all the way up to number 3. Might be a bit of a surprise considering that Burbank did not win the Sapphire League. However, tied record with Mali City, went undefeated in week 6. All the momentum is on Muffin's side. had a head-to-head win against Mali City in that last week of the season. This feels pretty reminiscent of what happened to New Moon in Season 3 and what happened to Turnback in Season 4. A Dom coach team has really started to figure it out and pick things up midway through the season, and by the end of the season, they're on a hot streak. And I truly do believe that this is the most dangerous team in the Sapphire League heading into the playoffs. Mali City, of course, they've been great all season. And when you win your league, it's kind of hard not to be a top 4 team. They hold down the 4 spot. 2-2, not a great week 6, but Kevin did what he needed to do to win that coveted bye. So he gets to wait on the winner of the wild card game. So, you know, that luxury is afforded to him, and that's why he's still top 4. New Moon Island comes in at 5. Strong week for Nico again. 3-1, 16-6, like we said. Very respectable record. Is going to have his work cut out for him playing Spike for the 3rd time, but they did split the season series, so we'll see how that goes. New Moon Island is probably the sleeper team to make it to the NWBA finals. Obviously, Akala Island and Sunny Shore are the 2 powerhouses of the league, but New Moon Island is very much capable of taking either of those 2 teams out, if not both of them. Humalau drops to number 6. Again, Kobu deciding to not play the last week of the season. As a result, 0-4. But 14-8 is still a great record, and considering that he was the Sapphire League leader from weeks 2 to 5, it's hard to really definitively say that he's not still the best team in that league. Obviously, he will not have the benefit of having the bye for league semis and won't have to play one of those wildcard teams, and is slated for a very tough match against Verbank, but he did win the regular season head-to-head, so maybe this is what Kuba wanted all along. But for what it's worth, burnout is a serious thing, and that might affect Kobu in the playoffs just as much as it did in the regular season. Lavender Town holds its spot at number 7, 2-1-1 week over week 6, so finishes with a 12-8-2 record. Pretty strong season from Logan. Again, wasn't really in danger of slipping out of the playoffs. Had already clinched a spot. Had a pretty solid week. Unfortunately, really wasn't able to gain any ground just because of how well Verbank and Mali City did, and the fact that Humalau was already not going to fall out of the top 3. But it's still a promising week and what you will want to see from a team that is looking to make a few upsets in the playoffs. Lava Rage moves up to the number 8 spot. Avery went 3-1 in week 6. That's what you want to see from a team that had to fight for its playoff life. Only losses to Akala Island. Can't complain there. So sitting pretty solidly. Is going to have to play that best of 1 no bans wildcard match. But again, all you need to do is make the playoffs. That's what Avery did. Took care of business. We'll see where it goes from here. Treasure Town moves up to number 9. Zebby had a 2-2 week in the last week of the season. Again, did what he needed to do for the most part to close that gap and try to make some noise and make the playoffs. And sure enough, Will had a win this week, so Zebby was able to sneak in. And truth be told, that's a very dangerous team coming out of the wild card spot. You're talking about Moon, Drago, Azu, Masquerada, Toxtricity. Zebby, I think, is among all 4 wildcard teams the sleeper team to be like, do not be surprised if they can find a way to knock off Akala Island and make a deep playoff run. Mount Hokulani moves up to 10. 1-2-1 in week 6. Not a good week for Kami, but again, all he really needed to do was win 1 to avoid missing the playoffs. He did what he needed to do, got the win, and so now we're here. We'll see if he can orchestrate the turnaround now that he doesn't have to focus on 4 sets. You know, maybe it was a bit of an overload that was really getting to him, but Kami's in the playoffs for a reason, right? He started off the season beautifully, that 6-1 record. That level of play is still there, I believe. It's just a matter of Kami being able to find it. And so he moves up to that last 10 spot. Will dropping down to 11. Unfortunately, just wasn't able to find a win. We knew coming into the week that he was going to have an absolutely brutal schedule and just couldn't manage to make it happen. Had some close sets, just wasn't able to find the victory. Ended up forfeiting the last match against Burbank because his luck against Lavender Town was just so abysmally terrible that he just didn't really want to bother with it. And you can't blame a guy, you know? Sometimes you just kind of see what the cards are dealing you and say, you know what? Nah, I'm good. I'm tapping out. I don't need to be here. So, unfortunate season for Will. But we know he's a good player. And it did take his team some time to get their chemistry together. So, I'm sure he'll be back and ready to roll next season and give this thing a better shot. New Barktown Lent Tomas hold firm at 12 and 13 spots. Nothing really to talk about. 1 and 3. Again, we said that they had pretty solid seasons, all things considered, for newcomers. And they were able to avoid relegation, which is all you really want to, do. Alfrenada actually moves up to 14, mostly because Chris actually played his matches this week and had a few, got some wins, played decently well. I'd like to think that the odds are not overwhelmingly, but solidly in his favor to win the relegation match and avoid having to miss the next season. We'll have to see, but said at the beginning of the season that thought that Chris would probably be a playoff contender, and unfortunately wasn't able to really be here for most of the season to prove that. But through his play in the weeks that he was actually able to be present, I think we saw some of that potential there, and so that's why he moves up to 14 despite being in the relegation match. Trey holds firm at 15. That 2-2 record was pretty much all due to forfeits. Didn't really do himself any favors to avoid relegation, but luckily Rhino did more to put himself in that position, so Trey is able to avoid that last place spot. And then in last place is Rhino because, again, just decided his interest in Mons really wasn't there. He did say he would lock in for the relegation match, so you will see Rhino participate in that. Just unfortunate that he wasn't really tapped in enough to try to avoid relegation in the first place. But I think a motivated Rhino, and perhaps with a head coach, we could actually see him do some damage in this league. This season just wasn't the one. That's all. Moving on to the final weekly stat leaders. Back to what we've seen all season, in which the Ruby League just kind of dominates the charts. That's been the name of the game the entire time, and things haven't really changed all that much in week 6. Obviously, Zamazetsu's monstrous week puts him at the top with 21, and Arcanine right behind at 14. Cinderace for Lavender Town with 11. Cinderace has put together some really good weeks this back half of the season, trying to make a last-minute push to make the All-Star team. And a few Mons tied with 10 KOs. Gudra for Lentomas Town, or Lentomas, another Mon that's really trying to push to make the All-Star team, as well as Gardevoir and Mudsdale for Sunny Shore. Over on the assist leaderboard, I think this was the quietest week for assists, but Mew still found a way to get to double digits. Almost made the 2020 club. One more assist would have done it for Mew, and unfortunate that it didn't, but with its versatility, I'd like to think that this Mon punched this ticket to the All-Star game. Again, it is voting based on what the factions believe, so we will have to see, but I think Mew has put together an incredibly strong season, especially from a Mon that didn't play the whole time. Again, I'd like to reiterate that I do believe this is one of the greatest free agent seasons of all time. Garchomp also had 10 assists this week. That Mon does get into the 2020 club, thanks to that performance. Samurott H of Lentomas put up 6 assists, as well as Mudsdale for Sunny Shore, another Mon that ended up making the 2020 club as a result. And a lot of Mons that put up 5 assists. Cleavor for Lava Ridge, Whiscash for Sunny Shore, Quagsire for Akala Island, Bronzong for Mali City, and Slowbo for Verbank, some familiar faces that we've seen over the course of the season. As far as points, Amazon H, Arcanine H, top 2 as usual. Mudsdale, due to its versatile week, in 3rd place at 23. Cinderace finishes with 20, putting it at 4th, and Gardevoir finishing with 19 at 5th. In terms of points per game, Gardevoir leads the pack with 4.8, so that 19-point performance came in 4 games, so very impressive performance there. Mudsdale putting up 4.6, Muck for Akala Island putting up 4.5. We've seen that trend from Akala Island over the course of the season where 1 or 2 Mons just happen to have an amazing week or an amazing set and end up on the leaderboard. Zamazenta H's Monster Week puts it in 4th place at 4.3. And lastly, Houndstone, which we've seen before in this category at 4.3 as well. And lastly, for KOs per game, Gardevoir leading at 2.5, Zamazenta with 2.3, Cinderace with 2.2, and quite a few Mons at 2.0. Mudsdale, Muck, Houndstone, Arcanine H, and Cerulege for Veilstone. As for the final league leaders, leaderboard looks like such. Reggie Drago ends up the KO king. Can't really be too surprised. It's done this time and time again, finishing with 62. Only Mon to get to 60 this season. Kleavor and Zamazenta finishing tied for 2nd with 56. Arcanine H finishing at 54. And Maluza just 1 KO short of that illustrious 50 KO club, but 49 is still absolutely nothing to scoff at. Seen it all season how New Moon has been able to stack up KOs. 2 Mons in the top 5 at the end of the season is crazy work. And speaking of crazy work, Yuxi, again, last week set the all-time record for assists in a season. Had a bit of a quiet week. I think it's most quiet week to date, but still finishes with a grand total of 67, completely lapping the field. Heatran finishes in 2nd place with 38. Glamora finishing in 3rd with 35. Overquill with 32. And Bronzong in 5th with 31. As far as total deaths, Yuxi surprisingly was not the league leader. It ended up being Overquill with 42. But Yuxi still came in 2nd place, tied with Lycanroc Dusk for 40. Guja finished in 4th with 38, and Zarude with 36. In terms of KOs per game, we've said this is the weird category, 1.8 for all 5 of these Mons: Lycanroc Midnight, Cerulege, Phalanx, Basculegion M, and Luxray. Spike's PU influence just all over between Lycanroc and Luxray. In terms of assists per game, Carbink ends up leading the league with 1.6. Bronzong right behind it, also 1.6. Yuxi finishing with a whopping 1.5. Whiscash and Heatran rounding it out at 1.2 each. In terms of points per game, Lycanroc Midnight ends up most in the league at 3.4. Chestnut and Luxray at 3.0. And then Cerulege at 2.9. And then Reggie Drago at 2.8. Again, extremely impressive to see a Mon that played a lot of games still in the top 5 for points per game in Reggie Drago. As far as games played, Veluza, only Mon that got to 50. That leads all Pokemon. Lycanroc Dusk and Overquill at 48. And Kleavor and Zarude at 45. Those were your Iron Men, so to speak, of the season. In terms of matches banned, Iron Valiant, to no one's surprise, led the way with 13. Tied with Volcanion. Walking Wake finished at 12. And then Zapdos and Iron Moth at 4th with 11. In terms of total points, Kleavor ends up winning that race at 107. Ended up being a really tight race down the stretch. Reggie Drago finishing with 103. Arcanine H 100 on the dot. An extremely coveted club to make, so congratulations to those 3 Pokemon. Zamazenta H barely missing the mark at 97. And then Gardevoir in 5th place at 74. In terms of KDA, Lycanroc Midnight ends up leading that race with 9.0. Was sitting at Unbounded for a while because it just hadn't died, but it had a lot of KOs. Go-Goat, which was the leader for much of the season, finishes at 2nd with 7. Chestnut finishing with 5. Quaquaval finishing with 4.09. And then Arcanine H finishing with 3.88. Again, extremely impressive from a Mon that we've seen play a majority of their team's games. And then lastly, in usage rate, Kleavor ends up winning that competition at 42.7. Reggie Drago with 38.7. Zoroark H at 38.4. Tauros Paldean Aqua which is not Veilstone, but Lava Ridge, or Newbark, excuse me, at 37.2. And lastly, Armor Rouge at 35.5. Two Mons really just holding All for Nada down in the few games that they did play towards the end of the season. Moving on to that MVP race. So, there have been 5 Pokemon selected for each league for the final MVP ballot. And they are as follows. Over in the Ruby League, Heatran for Akala Island played in 33 games, racked up 23 KOs in a grand total of 64 points. As we saw in the last segment, 38 assists, which was second in the league, and finished 11th in total points. An example of a Mon that pretty much does everything. Got a good number of KOs, second in the league in assists. It was a very good defensive Mon for Akala Island. This was the glue that really kept the team together. So Heatran, won MVP in Season 4. A repeat performance is not out of the cards. It's going to be a very, very tough path to get there, I think, just because of how crazy the offense has been in this league. But if any Mon can pull that off with a balanced performance, it is Heatran. Cleavor for Lava Ridge, 45 games, 56 KOs, which was tied in second in the league, 107 points, which led the entire league from the get-go. This was the Week 1 Pokemon of the Week. Cleavor has been in that conversation the entire season. And I think it is one of the 2 Mons that is most likely to win MVP award, especially considering that Lava Ridge had to make it through the wild card round. On the other hand, Regidrago for Treasure Town, 37 total games, 62 KOs, 103 points, led the league in KOs, second in points. Very comparable resume to Cleavor, with the exception of the fact that Regidrago got banned far more often than Cleavor did. In fact, I don't believe Cleavor was banned even once. Regidrago had to sit on the bench a few times, but when it showed up, it showed out. And were it not for Regidrago's performance in the back half of the season, Treasure Town likely would not have made the playoffs. So I believe that this Mon has a very slight edge in the MVP race, but I do think it will be a very, very tough competition between Drago and Cleavor. And perhaps another Mon could maybe sneak in and win that award instead. I do believe it is fairly wide open. A pair of New Moon Island teammates for the rest of Ruby League. Veluza, 50 games, 49 KOs, 73 points. That's 5th in KOs and tied for 6th in points. One of the most overperforming Pokemon of all time. You're talking about a Mon that is PU tiered and yet put up 73 points. It got a bunch of KOs. It was giving people problems all season. One of the greatest success stories in NWBA history for sure. And if Veluza could cap that off with an unlikely MVP, that is a story for the ages without a doubt. But it faces competition in the fact that one of its teammates is up for the ballot as well. Zamazenta H, 39 games, 56 KOs, which was tied for second in the league, and 97 points, which was 4th. Zamazenta H was the most immediate offense on this team, didn't necessarily need to set up, was able to either defense press or just choice ban and really wreck holes in teams. This Mon is not built for utility, it's built to hit you, and Zamazenta did that H. Zamazenta H did that very well over the course of the season, especially in those final 2 weeks of the season. And, I think it has an outside shot at winning that MVP award. Over in the Sapphire League, which I think is a less close race. First candidate, Arcanine H. 41 games, 54 KOs, 100 points. That's 4th in the league in KOs, 3rd in points. Led the Sapphire League in both by a comfortable margin. The way that the odds see it, the way that I personally see it, there is no reason this Mon does not win MVP. It absolutely dominated the Sapphire boards across, from wire to wire. Mali City's the top seed. Usually the best Mon on the best team wins MVP. Arcanine H fits that bill perfectly. And barring a completely wild turn of events, I don't see a world where this Mon doesn't win MVP. But if there is one Mon that I do think could challenge that, it is in fact Breloom for Burbank. 36 games, 42 KOs, 69 points. Tied for 6th in KOs and 10th in points over the course of the season. Again, with how top-heavy the Ruby League was, for Breloom to be top 10 in both categories is very impressive. It was the main source of offense for Verbank, especially down the stretch, where Muffin was really getting her wins together. Again, I think if there's any Mon that can take that MVP award away from Arcanine, it would be Breloom. As for the other 3 candidates, still very great Mons and still very strong seasons, just I don't think they stack up necessarily to Arcanine H at all. Humalau, Haxorus. It's funny that it says Humalau on the graphic, but I mean, is Haxorus not Humalau? Has it not been Humalau every single season of the NWBA? 21 games, 30 KOs, 51 points. Didn't have as strong of a season as it usually does. I believe this is Haxorus' weakest season to date, and still put up 51 points. Imagine that. But it was still a crucial part of Kobu's team, especially in that back half of the season. It was doing what it had done in previous seasons, where it just midway through the game says, all right, I'm here to win. Set up, get KOs, and leave. And I think if Humalau had played the final week of the season, Haxorus would have a much stronger MVP candidate case. Just doesn't have the total numbers and games to really stack up in that department. Overquill for Mount Hokulani, 48 games, 23 KOs, 36 points. Had 32 assists, which was 4th in the league. It was 12th overall in usage. This thing showed up to every game that Mount Hokulani played. It was the backbone of its defense. Set up Toxic Spike, set up Toxic. Just did everything in its power to gain every possible inch from Mount Hokulani. And at the end of the day, that team ended up making the playoffs, and I think a lot of that does have to do with Overquill. This is one of those Mons that if it wins MVP, it's not off the strength of the numbers, it's what the game film shows you. Because Overquill had to do a lot for this team. And for the most part, it certainly delivered. And the last candidate, Thunder's Eye, also from Mali City, 33 total games, 37 KOs, and 58 total points. 11th in KOs, tied for 12th in points. Was a very dynamic duo with Arcanine H for much of the season. But towards the end, Arcanine H really peeled away and established itself as the premier threat on the team. That being said, Thunder's Eye still had a fantastic season. I just don't think it did enough, not only to warrant an MVP case, but also didn't do enough to take away from Arcanine H's case as well. So very unique circumstance where, despite the fact that Mali City has 2 Mons in the final ballot, I don't think Thunder's Eye is going to take votes away from Arcanine H or dissuade people from voting for Arcanine H. I really don't. So if I had to predict the award right now, I would like to think those awards would go to Cleavor and Arcanine H. The voting will proceed on Versus Seeker later after Wonder Room. But there are a few awards that we can discuss here today, right now. So, the Helping Hand Award goes to the Mom with the most assists in each league at the end of the season. Obviously, Yuxi, 67, 1.523 assists per game. We talked about it for multiple weeks now. Most assists ever. Over in the Sapphire League, we have Glamora of Humalau, 35 assists. Comes out to just a little bit north of 1 assist per game. Impressive in the fact that it was traded mid-season from Verbank to Humalau and was still able to pick up right where it left off, if not improve its assisting ways. So being able to do that midway through the season for 2 separate factions is very impressive, very deserving winner in Glamora for certain. The Berserk Gene Award will go to Reggie Drago for 62 KOs, 1.676 KOs per game, absolutely ridiculous. Arcanine H, 54 KOs for Mali City, 1.317 KOs per game. Secret Sword Award actually goes to highest KDA. That will go to Like From Rock Midnight, who finished with 9 KOs, just 1 death. able to steal that one from Go-Goat right at the end. And Chestnut for Humalau, 5.0 KDA with a much more solid 20 KOs, 4 deaths. And finally, the 2020 club. We had 6 Pokemon make it this season. That is more than any season in the past. 3 mons per each league too. Very balanced. Heatran for Alcala Island, 23 KOs, 38 assists. Cleavor for Lavaridge, 56 KOs and 22 assists. Mudsdale for Sunny Shore, 24 KOs and 23 assists. Garchomp for Lavender Town, 22 KOs, 23 assists. Lemore for Humalau, 22 KOs, and 35 assists. And Overclow with 23 KOs and 32 assists. Now, our final segment, and what we're really here to talk about. Playoff bracket. Playoffs are here. No more fun and games. Let's talk about the path. First off, if you notice in the bottom right, that is in fact a relegation match. Offered out in New Bark like we discussed. Best of 3, no bans. Winner gets to come back the following season if they so choose. Loser has to sit out and will not be eligible to return until season 7. A mark of shame that no one ever really wants to carry. As of now, the time for that match is still to be determined, but likely to be played, if not tonight, Wednesday night. Wildcard matches, Lava Ridge and Treasure Town. Lava Ridge took the season series 2-0. Best of 1, no bans. You know how the wildcard goes. This is going to be a bloodbath. I expect Lava Ridge to go full sun. Play all the way to Walking Wake strengths. Don't mess around. Likely is going to bring Specs in the sun and let that thing go crazy. Toro Spartan Blaze is very good in the sun as well. Obviously, Cleavor, MVP candidate you're going to see. And then the other main MVP candidate for the Ruby League, on the other side, Reggie Draco's going to get to play. Roaring Moon is going to be out. Azumarill is going to be out. I expect a very fast-paced, brutal game from these two teams. It is going to be a scrap. The winner gets to go and meet Akala Island for the league semis. Lava Ridge got swept by Akala Island, but Treasure Town split the season series at 1-1, was only one of 2 teams to take a game from Akala Island. So that'll be very interesting if Treasure Town ends up winning that wild card game. Over on the Sapphire side, Lavender Town and Mount Hokulani will meet on the other side. Actually, 1-0-1 for Mali City. This was a very, for Mount Hokulani, this was a very interesting case. 1-0-1 for Lavender Town. This is a very interesting case where Lavender Town won the first meeting, 2-1. And then the two teams agreed to a draw in the last week of the season, which I actually think is a very smart strategic sense. You do not want to give your opponent information knowing you're probably going to play them in the wildcard round. So Logan and Kami, gentleman's agreement, we are not going to reveal our tricks. We are going to save all that for the wildcard game. I really, really like that strategy for both teams. So I am not entirely sure what we're going to see for that wildcard game. Neither of those teams really changed up their teams too much in the latter half of the season, but I'd like to think Lavender Town is probably going to go full rain. Let Basket Legion roam. Garchomp is going to be in play. Maybe not, because you would rather have Cinderace on the field, because Cinderace has put together a really good back half of the season, and then just have Basket Legion Elf without the rain. But there are some mons on that team that can set manual rain, so I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Mount Hokulani is going to have the full assortment: Sneasler, Greninja, Garganacl. Obviously, only 2 of those are going to get to play that game, but there's going to be some mixing and matching. I'd like to think Greninja shows up for sure for that wildcard game. Winner has to advance to play Mali City. I believe that Mali City split the season series from Mount Hokulani and then swept Lavender Town. As for the other league semis matchups, Burbank and Humalau, as I said before, Humalau took that 2-0, but Kobu his heart necessarily has not been in it, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that matchup plays out. Muffin is on a hot streak. It's hard to beat the same team 3 times in one season. We've seen that time and time again. And Dom coached teams have not lost to Kobu in the playoffs either. So I'd like to think all the precedent is on Muffin's side. That's going to be, I think, the matchup of the first 2 rounds for sure. On the other side, for the Ruby semis, Sunny Shore and New Moon Island split the season series. They played on Mercy Seeker in the rematch. It went down to the wire. Spike was barely able to hold on. This one is going to be really interesting. Spike has a better idea of what he wants to do against that team, but he had to pull a lot of weird tricks out the hat just to beat Nico the second time around. And I gotta wonder, does he try to go back to those same tricks? Is Nico gonna prepare for that? Is Nico just gonna not worry about what Spike tries to bring and run his offense the way he's ran it all season? That one is gonna be, I think it's gonna be the thinking man's matchup, right? You're gonna see some weird tricks for sure. It's gonna be a matter of whether or not Sunny Shore is able to play them right and get that win against New Moon Island. And then from there, it's a matter of who wins, right? Based on historical precedent from what we've seen in seasons past, we still have not seen a team make, or a GM make multiple NWBA finals. It has never happened in 4 seasons. We have seen a team that has not won a playoff set in the past make it to the finals every single season. We also typically tend to see at least one seed make the finals. So, that being said, there are a few teams that this favors. The big one, I think that all of those favored tend to be Mally City. Kevin has never made a finals, but he is the 1 seed. He has won playoff sets in the past, but he has never made it to the finals, so, you know, I think history favors him. I think history favors Muffin. Dom has coached 2 consecutive teams to the NWBA finals. Muffin has not won a playoff set yet. So I do believe that one of those teams is probably more likely to make the finals. But again, we're talking about Humolau, right? We can't sit here and ever say that Kobu probably isn't going to make the finals because it's Kobu. Time and time again, he is, if not the best team and the best GM, one of. And so I like to think that one of those top 3 seeds in the Sapphire League ends up making it out. If I would have to put money on somebody, truthfully, I'd probably put it on Muffin. As for the Ruby side, obviously Akala Island, Sunny Shore, it feels like destiny for those 2 teams to meet for the 3rd season in a row in league finals. Happened in season 3, Vasser won that one. Happened in season 4, Spike won that one. Will there be a rubber match? Most likely. But again, that New Moon Sunny Shore matchup is a true coin toss, I believe. And you cannot count out Lava Ridge or Treasure Town to be able to sneak in and knock off Akala Island, because we have typically seen that the very best team does not necessarily make it even to the league finals before. We've seen it happen in season 3 where Kobu lost in league semis. We saw it happen in season 2 where King, masquerading as Aaron, lost in league semis. So there is a precedent for one of those wildcard teams to upset Akala Island. Again, I think if you want to base it off historical precedent, if you could write up a script, the finals would probably be New Moon Island and Burbank. If you were asking me personally, who I believe is going to make the finals, it is likely going to be Akala Island and Burbank. Is that putting a lot of pressure on Burbank? Likely, but I think Muffin is up to the task. I think Dom is going to be able to coach her to put her in a position to make it. But at the end of the day, it's Pokemon and it's the playoffs. Anything can happen. And with that, that will wrap up this week's episode of Wonder Room. I would like to thank you all for watching. Those who watch on YouTube, those who watch on Twitch, thank you so much. The final episode of Wonder Room is to be determined. It will likely not be next Tuesday, because the playoffs are on a bit of a rolling basis, it is not going to be wrapped up in 1 week. And so the season wrap-up episode will be sometime later in the month. But the episode will be coming your way. So do not fret. This is not the last episode of Wonder Room. We will see each other again at least one more time. Thank you all for watching. And stay tuned for more Wonder Room.